We humans all suffer from a kind of blindness, and I'm not referring to an eye disorder or a visual impairment, I'm referring to ocean blindness. You see, we go to the beach or look out over the marina, and we think it looks lovely, but often it is not lovely. Often that shimmering aqua surface masks a degraded ecosystem. It's true that many of us are aware of some of the threats, in particular tropical reefs, such as the Great Barrier Reef, get quite a deal of attention. But temperate waters are often overlooked, despite most people living in the temperate zone. Temperate marine ecosystems are characterised by seagrass meadows, kelp forests, and mangrove wetlands, all of which are under threat around the world. The seagrass meadows along this very stretch of coastline out there in Gulf St. Vincent have suffered decades of mistreatment and neglect. There are areas south here where the seagrass, which historically was within about 50 metres of the shore, is now several hundred metres offshore for a variety of reasons, including, but mostly due to runoff. The mangrove forests just north of here, up at St Kilda, are also quite threatened, with tens of hectares either dead or dying. Earlier today we heard from some speakers from Tasmania. Well, it's even more staggering what's happening there. The giant kelp forests of Tasmania are barely 5% of what they were compared to 50 years ago. We can't afford to let these ocean ecosystems die, for if our oceans die, our planet dies. Now, we all know that oceans harbour beautiful wildlife and provide a bounty of food. That alone should be reason enough to care, I think. But actually, oceans do much, much more. Oceans produce over half the air that we breathe. Oceans regulate the global climate. And oceans sequester about 1/3 of carbon emitted by human activity, over 2 billion metric tonnes a year. We're land creatures, though. You know, we become outraged if someone chops down a single heritage tree, and yet if tens of acres of seagrass get degraded by a bit of runoff, we largely are ignorant. This inability to perceive or care about what is going on underwater, that's what I mean by ocean blindness. So I decided I wanted to do something about that. So with my late wife back in 2017, I founded the Australian Ocean Lab, or AusOcean. The origins, though, go back several decades, way back to the 1980s. About the last time my hair was this long was back then, actually even further back. I was living in California at the time, and there I learned to scuba dive in the cold, clear waters of the Monterey Bay, kept chilled by that cold Alaskan current. That sounds like a bad thing, but actually, had I learned to dive in warmer waters, I might never have put on a 7mm thick wetsuit. Many divers never experience the wonders of temperate waters, shunning them for the tropical reefs that attract so much attention. Yet temperate waters hold an incredible diversity of marine life, and few more so than the waters of southern Australia or the Great Southern Reef. I hope by now that everyone's heard of the Great Southern Reef, the GSR. But in case you haven't, it's a network of interconnected reefs covering over 70,000 square kilometres, which is big, of southern Australian waters. Seagrass meadows, kelp forests, mangroves fuel a vast and productive ecosystem that is home to thousands of species, including the iconic giant cuttlefish, which AusOcean has adopted as its logo, leafy sea dragons, Australian sea lions, migrating whales, and more. It's one of the most pristine and unique reefs in the world. 85% of the species are endemic to the region, found nowhere else in the world. And the region contributes over $10 billion in economic activity annually. And there's still a lot we don't know about the Great Southern Reef. Sadly, what we do know is not always good news. Climate change, overfishing, the usual careless development is putting this marvellous ecosystem at risk. The trouble is, gathering knowledge about our oceans is quite challenging at the best of times, and particularly so in rough southern waters. Acquiring ocean data relies on expensive technology It's technology that's usually has its origins in the oil and gas industry or military technology. It's usually engineered for extreme depths, extreme pressures. And so this very, very expensive technology makes it quite inaccessible to all but the most well-funded researchers. So this is the problem that AusOcean is trying to solve. Our mission is to help our oceans through technology. And specifically, we develop and apply open source technology to help solve ocean science and conservation challenges. Our long-term aim is to transform the way in which ocean data is collected and then communicated on a global scale. That image was produced from some AusOcean technology that's near Whyalla at Stony Point, where the giant cuttlefish are aggregating. By the way, by open source, if you're not familiar with the term, that means that the technology is available for use or modification for free as others see fit to use it. We're not in the business of keeping secrets. In fact, the best thing that could happen would be for non-profits around the world to copy our technology shamelessly and then create monitoring on a global scale. I would love to have them copy all of my technology. That would be a fantastic outcome. We focus right now on continuous monitoring because you cannot manage what you cannot measure. And it turns out it's extremely rare to have continuous monitoring of any marine system. As a result, scientific understanding of change, whether it's hour to hour, day to day, year to year, is very fragmented. And what that really means is there's a lot we don't know. What we need is continuous monitoring, like this image, like this video. For example, one day a shellfish reef might appear healthy, and yet a short time later, juvenile oyster mortality might have suddenly skyrocketed. What happened? Was it predation? Was it some disease? Was it some change in water chemistry? Well, without continuous monitoring, you're just speculating. Before AusOcean, visual monitoring in the ocean meant divers would temporarily set up cameras, maybe for a few hours, maybe for a few days, and then you'd go back later and retrieve those cameras and you would analyse that footage, usually tens or hundreds of hours back at the lab on land. Acoustic monitoring was very similar. You'd put down your hydrophones, you'd fill up the SD card, and then you'd retrieve it. What that meant was the data was neither complete and nor was it available in real time. So we at AusOcean decided to focus on continuous monitoring at fixed locations by means of floating platforms, which we refer to as rigs. They're not like oil and gas rigs. They're very, very cute. They're only 1.5 metres by 1.2 metres. And you're starting to see them scattered around South Australian waters, and I hope one day around global waters. Now, it may sound a bit prosaic, compared to high-tech submersibles, ROVs, UAVs, other TLAs. But actually, our little rigs, which can be built for about $700, and typically by students with really only modest kind of workshop skills, they can be incredibly useful platforms for doing real science and considerably more cost-effective than other high-tech gadgets. So we also design and build custom sensors to be deployed with the rigs, underwater cameras, hydrophones, environmental sensors, and more. Our rigs are the workhorses, though, that provide the necessary power and the communications. Data that we capture from our rigs, whether it's video data or acoustic data or temperature data, dissolved oxygen, whatever, goes straight to the cloud, that proverbial cloud in that data center sky, where it's stored, analysed, and then shared. So we're building out this platform right now. I've always believed, and most of my career has been in technology, but I've always believed that for technology to be useful, it has to also be affordable and timely. So we design our equipment to be cheap and easy to build. I'm particularly excited about our school program, Network Blue. Students build, deploy, and then maintain their own rig, thereby contributing to a global citizen science network where the data is shared with students and schools around the world. With the next generation fully engaged, I'm optimistic that we will find that elusive cure for ocean blindness. Thank you.